What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the very first episode of Bottom of the Stack, a new Magic the Gathering podcast I'm starting where I talk about the decks I've built, new cards coming out, and Magic in general. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite commanders so far, Dragonlord Ojutai. So Ojutai has been in my collection for quite some time. He was in a box of super old cards I had that I collected as a kid back in like 2013, 2014, 2015. And I pulled him out as I was looking for legendary creatures, and he turned out to be one of my favorites. So if you're a fan of big flying dragons and controlling the game board, this is kind of the perfect deck for you. So Ojutai himself is a 5/4 flying elder dragon. He is hexproof as long as he's untapped, and he also has, whenever he deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So obviously hexproof is great as long as you can manage to keep him untapped, and then his ability to look at all those cards and draw one each time you do combat damage is a great card draw advantage engine as well. And on top of all that, he's a 5/4 flying elder dragon. So I wouldn't say he's an overpowered commander by any means. He's not even that popular. I'm pretty sure he's around 900 on EDH rec. So yeah, I just checked, and Ojutai is number 989 on EDH rec. So not super popular, but definitely a good commander if you can build the deck for him. And especially if budget isn't an issue for you, then you can definitely make him a pretty great commander with cards like Robe of the Stars and Mithril Coat, which are both sitting in my maybe board for when I decide I want to drop a bag. So moving on into kind of the playstyle of the deck, it leads heavily into control with lots of counter spells and removal spells, a solid package of instants, as well as lots of enchantments and a couple artifacts to really buff Ojutai, so a little bit of Voltron there, as well as lots of draw spells to generate a good card advantage. So I'm looking at all the cards in my hand, and I'm putting the ones that I don't want out of my library, and I'm making sure that I can get my win cons as fast as possible. So I tried to make this deck have a great balance of offense and defense with the counterspell package and instants, as well as all the removal spells, and it already has a great offense package with Ojutai himself originally having flying, and with all the enchantments I plan to make him unblockable, as well as giving him more power overall to make him big and scary. So this pretty much allows you to always be ahead on cards and having a big scary dragon that nobody wants to block because it will kill all their stuff, and if they don't block it, it'll kill them because he's your commander. So the main strategy of this deck is to draw as many cards as I can and create that card draw advantage, as well as making Ojutai as big as I can and giving him lots of combat damage triggers, which is kind of the synergy I built around, as well as running that good removal package to control the board with things like removal spells, Austere Command, for example, Dovin's Veto, for example, which allows you to get that attack trigger off from Ojutai and get a bunch of cards in your hand and feel like you are always at an advantage. Your friends will not like you with these, okay? Just a fair warning. So the synergies in this deck are kind of mainly combat damage triggers. I've put in a lot of Thassa's abilities, such as her Bident and the Emissary, which is a crab enchantment creature that I found in my collection actually while I was building this deck, and I put in Thassa God of the Sea as well as Bident of Thassa, and I found Thassa's Emissary, and I thought that's too perfect. So threw this crab in the deck. He is a 3/1 blue 3/3 crab. You can also cast him for a bestow cost of 5/1 blue, which is kind of expensive, but again, it's flavorful, and he gives enchanted creature +3/+3, as well as whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So when you combine that with the Bident of Thassa, as well as Thassa herself, you can make Ojutai unblockable, and then you're drawing 2 cards from those abilities. And not only that, you are also activating Ojutai's ability afterwards, or however you'd like to break it down, since you get to pick, and they all happen at the same time under your priority. A few other things I've included in the deck to make sure the main plan works out, or if not, I can kind of go in another route, are things like Guardian Scalelord, which allows me to return something with mana value 3 or less from my graveyard. And when I play Guardian Scalelord, he has backup which gives his ability to another target creature if I choose to give that creature the +1/+1. So for example, if I played something like Null Drifter, and I played him for his vote cost, he would then be sacrificed, put into my graveyard. I could play Guardian Scalelord, give Dragonlord Ojutai the +1/+1, which would allow me to pull Null Drifter from my graveyard onto the field, which would be pretty cool. So I get to play him for the cheap, a vote cost, to draw the 2 cards, and then I get him back for his Annihilator 1 and a good 4/4 flying body to back up Ojutai. So there isn't a lot of big creatures in this deck, but there is ways to recur a few things from my graveyard, as well as a few enchantments from my graveyard. And I have the counter spells to make sure nobody can remove Ojutai, and backing up his hexproof as well in that way. Moving on, I'm going to talk about what I think are the key cards in this deck, and I know what you're thinking. The new diamond symbols from the new Game Changer list are updated on Architect. I do indeed have Cyclonic Rift in the deck list and Grand Arbiter. I actually just picked up Grand Arbiter the other day, so he is solidified in the deck. He's not leaving, and I'm going to buy Cyclonic Rift. So if we're talking about the bracket here, I guess technically this deck would be a 3, I believe, because it has 2 Game Changer cards. But I don't think by any means this is a super overpowered deck. I think it can be fun. I think it can be challenging to beat, which to me is fun if you enjoy challenges. And I enjoy being the control player at the table, and I know people don't enjoy that, but it is always needed at a game of Commander, and if you don't think so, we disagree, and we are the heroes that every table needs. Other great cards would be Felidar Retreat. This card will allow me to make some cats and put them onto the battlefield, then give them +1/+1 and Vigilance, or give Ojutai +1/+1 and Vigilance until the end of turn. So it has a good synergy with Ojutai, as well as it will keep him hexproof. And obviously all of these enchantments are great, but I would say my favorite enchantment, and probably what I would consider a key card in the deck, is Steel of the Godhead, which if you're not familiar, it is a 2 in either white or blue for enchant creature. As long as enchanted creature is white, it gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. As long as enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1 and is unblockable. So in case any of these cards get removed, another key card you could say in the deck are things like Auramancer, as well as Sovereigns of the Lost Alara, which will allow me to search for more enchantments, kind of a tutor in that way. Another key card here would be Armored Skyhunter, and if you're not familiar, he is a 3 and 1 white flying cat knight, a 3/3. Whenever Armored Skyhunter attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put an aura or equipment card from among them onto the battlefield. If an equipment is put onto the battlefield this way, you may attach it to a creature you control, put the rest of those cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, pretty great card there, allowing me to either put an equipment on for free, or obviously put an aura card on Ojutai. And it happens every time he attacks, which is also pretty amazing. And I would say probably my favorite card in the deck is a Fatal Alchemist, because I love the art so much, how this guy is just trying to manipulate this dude, and it kind of fits well with the deck in case all else fails, and somehow I can't keep Ojutai untapped. I have my Fatal Alchemist to do the job for me, as well as also untapping my artifacts, such as Soul Ring or any signets I have on the battlefield, and he's just a pretty solid card overall, throwing in the morph there to confuse your opponents. We also have things like Combat Research to be another card draw engine buff to Ojutai, so you can pretty much be drawing a ton of cards every time Ojutai hits one of your opponents or does combat damage to him. I kind of didn't lean too hard on the trample, as I have a good amount of evasion in this deck, and again, I don't need it to be extremely overpowered. I just kind of want it to be fun and powerful. We also have things like Brave the Sands, which gives Ojutai Vigilance and can allow me to block an additional creature with him if need be. Aqueous Form, a great enchantment here that makes him unblockable. Brainstorm, great card draw card here. One of the favorite counter spells in the deck is Stubborn Denial. It is a counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. It also has Ferocious. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, counter that spell instead. So In most cases, it is a 1 mana counter spell for any non-creature spell. I also really enjoy Silumgar's Scorn because I always plan to control Ojutai. This would be a great counterspell as it'll be a 2 mana counterspell. Other fun cards I've included in the deck are things like Single Combat, which makes every player pick 1 creature, sacrifice the rest, and then they must fight it out with what they have on the board, which obviously is great for me as I have a huge flying Elder Dragon. I also included things like Open the Armory as 1 tutor. I might end up taking it out in the future as I'm kind of starting to learn that tutors are a little overpowered. And then I would say Imrith Desert Doom is probably one of the better synergistic cards in the deck. He is a legendary dragon for 3 and 2 blue, 5/5 flyer. Imrith Desert Doom has Ward 4 as long as he's untapped, so he's pretty similar to Ojutai in that aspect. And whenever he deals combat damage to a player, I draw a card. Then, if I have fewer than 3 cards in hand, I draw cards equal to the difference. So let's say, for example, we attack with Imrith and Ojutai with all of his draw triggers. I could activate Imrith, and then I could also activate Ojutai, so I could draw up to 3, and then draw way past 3 with whatever Ojutai has. We also have a solid land package with things like Edakar Waste, Ash Barrens, Castle Ardenval, Iganjo, Seat of the Empire, pretty cool land/removal spell if need be. So I would say the tips for this deck would be to plan on controlling the board, stacking draw triggers and trying to make sure nobody can kill your big scary dragon. You draw as many cards as you can and you win the game that way. If Ojutai gets removed a bunch of times and he no longer becomes a condition for you, you can hopefully lean on things like Felidar Retreat and your big creatures like Nazihal, Null Drifter, Guardian Scalelord to maybe bring Ojutai back if you have the sort of hand to pull that off. So yeah, overall, I think Ojutai is a pretty solid commander. I actually have only played with about 2/3 of this deck, 1v1 with my girlfriend, so I'm not even finished with the deck. I don't own all of the cards. All the ones you see with a blue or green hash are the ones I do own. But I've play tested it quite a few times here on Architect, and I feel it'll be a pretty good deck, as well as the 70 cards I do have of the deck have been able to handle pretty well on their own. This deck is great for people who love to make their commander big and scary and love to control the board and draw as many cards as they can in a game. So I hope this helped you build an Ojutai deck if you are building one, or if you're looking for a new white-blue commander. I highly recommend Ojutai if you're into control and Voltron. So if you like this deck and you want to see more like this, drop a like and subscribe, and I will hopefully be doing more of these videos soon. Thank you for watching the very first episode of Bottom of the Stack. I'm your host, Vant.